Welcome, everyone, to CertiPay's Coffee Break series. We're really glad you've joined us. Today's Coffee Break number 24, and we're going to be talking about an end-of-the-year HR checklist for you. And we can't really talk about an end-of-the-year checklist without talking about a how to start the new year checklist. So we got two parts to this HR checklist series. Today's is going to be the end of the year, and in 2 weeks, part two is going to be how to start the 2021 year with an HR checklist. So be sure to join us next time as well. And I am here with Cindy Merkel from our HR team. She's our moderator this morning, and I am your host, Rachel Camella. And once again, I'm so glad you guys are all here this morning. We are going to mute you just to keep the background noise down. So please do not take any offense to that, but keep your phones on mute for us, and then put those questions in that chat box, and we'll make sure we get to everyone. Fantastic. All right. So as I said, what we're talking about is an end-of-the-year HR checklist. And so I want to really stress that it's a checklist. What I think you might consider doing is get your own notepad out and write down some of the things that apply to you. We are going to talk about a whole bunch of different things on this checklist. They may not all apply to you, but just write down the ones that do. I'm also not going to dig into details about some of these things or defining some of these things, because we could be here for hours. So for the purpose of today's coffee break, we're really going to kind of keep it to items on the checklist that you want to follow up on and take action on these particular items. Sound like a plan?
Let's go.
All right. So starting with payroll tax issues and employer-employee taxes. And I kind of put the different items on our checklist in a few different buckets. So this is our first bucket. You want to take a look at some of the things. Again, some of these things will apply to you and some of the things may not. For example, my first item here is the Employee Retention Credit, or the ERC, the ERTC, Employee Retention Tax Credit. If you chose to take this credit when we first entered into the COVID situation, then you want to pay attention to this now. Is this something you want to make sure you tally up any of those credits that you took? Make sure you appropriately subtracted them from your 941s. If there's something that you missed, you can still do it before the end of the year, so you can use the fourth quarter. So pay attention to that. Quick note on the PPP. If you did get the PPP loan, you cannot do the Employee Retention Credit. So pay attention to any possible scenario of double dipping. And so at the point when you receive that PPP loan, you cannot do any Employee Retention Credit on that. So make sure you're aware of anything that you did, any credits that you took, have your backup documentation prepared, make sure you applied your tax credits correctly there. Taking us right into the next point, the FFCRA and the CARES Act tax credits here. Take a look at, go through each quarter, make sure you got the correct amount of credits. Don't miss anything. And under the FFCRA, you can claim credits for not just paying your individual employees, but also if you had to pay their health care premiums or a portion of their premiums, that can be part of the credit as well. Under the CARES Act, same thing. If you have loan dollars in there, or if you did any employee retention credits, or if you did any tax postponement, pay attention to anything you did in this year and make sure you have the correct documentation and backup for whatever credits you take on that. Now's the time to prepare any kind of FICA and FUTA forms and filings. So be prepared for that. Of course, fourth quarter is due at the end of the following month on your FICA forms for your 941. Now the FUTA also, I think you have some extra time Those are due at the end of January for the year end 2020, unless you paid all of your FUTA taxes timely. So if you pay them on your payroll schedule, then you have until the end of February to file those forms. So looking at your end of the year tax filings, again, time to prepare your W-2s, your 1099s, make sure you have all of the information ready there, and keeping in mind any issues or payments and tax filings that you had along the way related to COVID or these other acts. Double check the IRS guidance on the payroll tax holiday. This was part of the presidential executive order for the fourth quarter. So if you chose to take that tax credit holiday, which could have applied to any of the employees who were paid $4,000 or less in your pay cycle, in a 2-week pay cycle, then they would be eligible if you chose to do that. This was not a mandatory thing. It was just available. The taxes, the Social Security taxes that would have been on holiday, according to this, will have to be repaid in the first quarter of 2021. So keep that in mind with how you want to prepare to do that. If you chose to do that, I know a lot of people did not elect to do that tax holiday, but keep in mind those Social Security taxes will be due first quarter of 2021. And finally, ACA. Check on your ACA requirements on the 1094 and the 1095s, and be ready to turn in any of those filings for the 2020 year. And again, this may or may not apply to you if you are in ACA reporting, or you know you're in that. You know you have those filings to do. So be prepared. Those are coming. How we doing? Any questions so far?
No, ma'am. Let's keep rolling.
Great. On to benefits. Now is the time to do a quick audit of the year and determine if your requirements for ACA have changed. And you really need to look at each individual month. And so take a look back in 2020 and count the FTEs. Now, there's been a lot of talk about FTEs with regards to the PPP loan. So if you had to tally up your FTEs for the PPP loan, you based it on a 40-hour week. So set that aside for a bit and do your audit for ACA reporting, and your FTE count is actually based on a 30-hour week. So set aside your PPP FTE mindset, go back through your year and do an audit for ACA. And that means you're going to look at all of your employees in each month, and you can do it by adding up all the hours and dividing by 30 for each month, or you can add up all of your full-times if you know everybody's full-time, if you have part-time, or if you have seasonal employees. You really want to break it down by the hour and then by the month so you can get that number, and then calculate your FTE average for the year. And so for ACA reporting, take a quick look at that and determine, have you dipped under the 50 threshold for your FTE count for ACA reporting? You may not have to follow the same guidelines in 2021. Or if you have added employees and maybe you were at 30 before and now you're over that 50 threshold, you need to be prepared to do the reporting for your 2021 year. So always a good time of year to go back over that. Let's take a look at your healthcare plans and see what you have in your healthcare plan and what you're offering. There is also a new threshold this year. It is 9.83%. It is slightly higher than it was last year. So take a look at where your employer breakdown is and make sure that you are meeting the correct threshold. If this sounds like foreign information to you, please communicate with your broker and ask them, are we following the guidelines for the correct threshold, and get some information there. There is a slight change this year for 2021. So when you go through that audit, that's one of the things you want to check. Review the FFCRA paid leave. We are still in play on the FFCRA all the way through the end of the year. We don't have any changes. We don't have an extension. We don't have any more information on that just yet. I expect to see something, whether it's an extension of this one or a completely new bill. I'm not sure, but we will definitely keep you up to date and informed when there are any changes. But in the meantime, FFCRA paid leave is still in effect through the end of the year. So be sure you follow those guidelines. Remember, you do need to have a sign available for the employees to see what these policies are. And the employees are entitled to paid leave through the end of the year connected to COVID. And if you're not sure about some of that, please go to our website and look for our previous coffee breaks where we talked about FFCRA paid leave.
Rachel,
and yeah.
I actually have a question. What happens if the employee goes out on COVID pay, I don't know, let's just say the 28th? Since it started before the deadline, do they get to carry over into the new year with their pay time off? Or does it cut off at the 31st?
Yeah, good question. Thanks for bringing that up, Cindy. As far as the FFCRA pay leave goes, the eligibility for pay leave will expire on the 31st. So, and that's, again, the way it's written right now. So as of the end of this year on the 31st, that would be the last possible day to get paid leave as a result of COVID. So if somebody is out sick, in your example, starting on the 28th, and they're out the 28th, 29th, 30, 31, and they're still out, they're still sick, the 1st, and into another week, it would only be those first 4 days that they would be eligible for pay. So under the current plan. Again, I do expect it to change. I do expect to see something, but at this point, the paid leave will end on the 31st.
I think that's important to note that if you go out before the deadline, that does not mean the funds will go beyond that date. Everything ends, including the funds, on that date.
And so to the same point, I think it's important to bring up, as an employer, you can make the decision to pay somebody anyway. It's okay for you to pay the individual. Let's say they're out for a whole week that spans into the new year. You can pay them for whatever days you want to. You're allowed to do that. The difference is what you can claim as credit. So you can only claim the days that they were out sick in the fourth quarter as part of the credit. So that's important to know as well. Like, you can decide to pay pretty much anybody what you want, but without considering, of course, not creating any discrimination pieces, but you are allowed to pay people more days than what the FFCRA will cover. You just can't claim it as a credit. Good?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for that question. I think we definitely want to have that conversation and make sure it's clear for everybody. And so again, talking about the FFCRA and the CARES Act, we know that the coverage ends on the 31st, but the provision that covers the testing does not. And under both the FFCRA and the CARES Act, they speak to how testing gets paid for. And under the testing coverage mandate, insurance carriers are obligated to pay for testing as long as we are classified in a national emergency. So while these other pieces of the FFCRA expire at the end of the year, that piece follows the determination of national emergency. So the testing mandate stays in effect while we're in a national emergency. It does not follow the calendar. And then finally, when we talk about employee benefits, we have had such a shift in our the way our office looks and the landscape of our working schedules and our work lives. So take a good look now at your entire benefits package. Review what you offer and review what that looks like now that you may have people working remotely, or you may have alternating schedules or shift changes. Make sure you take a look at your benefit package so that it also can mature with the changes that we've had in this last year. So take a good long look at that and see what you can do, or you may have offered some benefits that are irrelevant now. You may have some benefits that you can trade out or create some new ones that make sense. So take a good look at that. And if you need any help with that, please reach out to us. CertaPay is here for you with all these things. We have a lot of different things that we can do to help you in your business. Hashtag CertaPay.
Can I make a comment on that as well, Rachel?
Yes, of course.
I actually have a client that we've been talking in lieu of a bunch of folks that were unable to take their vacation due to COVID and things. Look at maybe the possibility, if you can afford it, to pay it out, or if you don't normally roll it over, maybe you can roll over some of it. Just take a look at, what's transpired over the past 7-8 months, and, what's fair and consistent to your employees as far as allowing them to either get paid out, roll over any vacation or PTO time that you would not normally do.
That's right. And now's the perfect time to address that. Thanks, Cindy. Okay. So compliance, there are a lot of pieces here. And again, some of this may apply to you and some of it won't. I encourage you to just, jot down the things that you want to make sure you consider and get to before the end of the year to start the new year. So make sure you distribute any notices, compliance notices, ERISA, HIPAA, 401k, maybe your benefit list, whatever that is, and prepare those and get them ready to distribute to your employees. You want to audit, and we talked about the FTEs, the full-time equivalent employee count for ACA reporting. So now is a good time to take a look at the FTEs for FMLA compliance purposes as well. Again, you may have had a shift in your employee count over the last year in one direction or another. So now's the time to take a look at that. Now, the difference with FMLA compliance is if you were over that 50 full-time equivalent threshold in 20 weeks out of the year, then you would be obligated to offer FMLA benefits and FMLA coverage. So take a look at that. We look at by the month in the ACA breakdown, and it's by the week for FMLA. And again, looking at 20 weeks out of the year, they don't have to be consecutive. So if any 20 weeks in 2020, you exceed that 50 threshold, you want to be able to follow the FMLA compliance. And what we recommend for our employees is, even if you're close, just follow FMLA compliance and FMLA guidelines. It really doesn't affect you negatively. You are keeping your employees' position for them, keep their health coverage intact, and you allow them to take the time off for the reasons that they need to take off. So do that audit and see if you maybe now need to follow FMLA guidance. And if you were maybe over that threshold before, and now maybe because of COVID, you had less than 50 employees for the majority of the year, you maybe don't need to follow it anymore. So take a little bit of time, go through and do that FTE audit by the week and see where you are at this point. Overtime rules. We did have some additional guidance this year on fluctuating work weeks, and with so many people having different types of schedules and fluctuating work weeks this year, now is a good time to take a look at that. Make sure you're up to speed on that. And the way the guidance is talking about the changes to this are looking at the entire week. If you have fluctuating hours and you want to say, well, you get 800 a week regardless of how many hours you work, you're allowed to do that. Now, the difference is you still have to track hours, and you have to pay overtime. So just if you say we have fluctuating weeks, we know you worked 32 hours this week, 45 that week, 57 this week, and we're going to pay you X number of dollars no matter what. You can do that, of course, if the breakdown is higher than minimum wage, and you still have to pay time and a half. So I know I may be taking a confusing situation and making it more confusing. Again, we have a very detailed pay coffee break. I would encourage you to go back and look at the different pay structures that we talked about on that coffee break. This one can get a little bit tricky. And so just to kind of go back over it quickly, if you choose to pay a flat rate for a fluctuating work week, these are still hourly employees. They're still non-exempt hourly employees. You're technically paying them by the hour. But you're saying, okay, we're going to throw a block of money at every week no matter what. And if they do work over 40, you have to take all the hours worked and come up with an hourly rate for that particular week, and then pay them that extra half time for the hours over 40. So you're still obligated to break it down to an hourly rate and pay time and a half appropriately. If this is confusing and you need more information, reach out to us. We will definitely help you on that. But again, take some time and make sure you have everybody classified correctly and paid correctly. And if you have fluctuating work weeks, pay attention to that and make sure you're still handling overtime properly. Are we good?
We're good.
All right. So prepare for any minimum wage increases. I know Florida has voted to go to the $15 an hour mark, and we're going to start in 2021 going to $10 an hour. The change doesn't happen until September, but you want to start preparing for how you're going to shift everybody to the new minimum wage. Other states have had some minimum wage increases as well. So whatever state you're in, be prepared, start to think about that. And do you need to redo some job descriptions to match those numbers? Do you need to create a new range for positions? Do you need to shift other positions as a result of the minimum wage adjustment? Start to get your head around what that's going to look like in the new year, and make sure whatever state you're in, you know where are your new numbers and what dates are those change requirements going to occur. Schedule your required compliance trainings. Did you know that there are now 16 states who require COVID training? There are 36 states who require harassment awareness training. So make sure you know what your requirements are, and then get those trainings scheduled early. Get that done so you follow the compliance on any of those training pieces. And train everybody along the way. I always think that more information, training, it's the best risk mitigator that you can invest in. Anytime that you give your employees information and knowledge, it makes you better and stronger. So think about any kind of required trainings you might have in order to be in compliance, and get that scheduled early. Check for updated OSHA policies. There are a few changes in OSHA compliance and safety compliance. You want to check for those and make sure you follow any of those changes along the way. And right into the next line, update your own safety guidelines, your own safety protocols. Many of you have already done that because we've talked about it a bunch of times. But have some safety procedures in place. Make sure you talk about COVID information and COVID safety, and have procedures and policies that your employees can follow that will help keep your business safe and keep your business thriving. And then we have the EEO-1 collection deadline. So currently, typically your EEO-1 reporting is due somewhere around March of the following year. But because we went into COVID in 2020, the 2019 EEO-1 data reporting has been postponed. So right now, the 2020 and 2019 EEO-1 data collection reports are going to be due in March of 2021. So keep that on your radar. Be prepared for that. The EEO-1 data for the past 2 years is due in the same month. I haven't seen any changes on that just yet, but that be prepared for that, as you will have 2 years that you need to turn in. And finally, in terms of compliance, be aware of the ban the box. 35 states have eliminated the checkbox for have you been convicted of a crime. So be aware, again, if you're in one of those states, you want to take that box off your application off of your employment application. And even if you are not in one of those states, consider taking it off anyway, because we see that as a trend. We see that's going to be coming pretty soon. So consider taking that off. We don't want to discriminate against anyone for those reasons. Let's keep moving. Do we have any questions, Cindy?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So some general HR things to talk about. Again, review all of your insurance policies. So take a look at your work comp policy, your general liability, your equipment, whatever it is. Now that we have a different landscape for what our working offices look like, make sure your insurance policies match that. What happens if your employees are working at home and have a situation that's connected to the work? Whatever it is, make sure your insurance policies cover those things. You may even be able to save some dollars on premiums because you have a certain percentage working from home. So a good time to review those policies and the content in your policies. Like I mentioned before, job descriptions, it's a great time to review your job descriptions. There may have been changes to the pay range. There may have been changes to tasks. Maybe you had to consolidate a couple of positions, so you have to recreate what's under a particular job description. Maybe you've eliminated some. Take a good look at your job descriptions and make sure they're up to date, in compliance, and match what your business looks like right now. I always recommend having an updated handbook every single year. We tell all of our clients, get everybody together in December or January, go over revisions, additions, deletions, and go through, make your updates and have the conversation. Make sure everybody is aware of your changes and acknowledges those changes, and do it together. Order pizza, or send out, if you're doing it remote, have a Zoom call where everybody brings their snacks, or do it over a lunchtime window, whatever it is. But talk about the updates and changes in your handbook, and then track that. Log anybody who attended that meeting, get everybody's acknowledgement. We received the handbook, we're aware of the handbook, we were given plenty of time to go over these changes, whatever it is, get their acknowledgement, keep that for safekeeping in their file for later. And then, of course, update any information or language in there that's surrounding COVID or safety policies or any updates that we've had this year. Take a look at your employee files. Make sure you've got them in compliance, any updated information that needs to be in there. And the biggest thing about employee files is don't keep things in there that you don't need. You know, a lot of times when we go in and do file audits, there's just so many, every single email sent is printed and stuck in a file. You don't need all of that. Limit what you keep in an employee's file. Keep exactly what you need, but don't keep what you don't. And, you know, I've got it down on the next point, but shred all of the documents that you don't need. If you don't need to keep it anymore, shred it. If you don't need old files, if you're outside of a time window, shred the old documents. Get them out of your hands. You don't need to keep every single piece of paper that was connected to everything. Get rid of things you don't need. And at the end of the year, gather up all of your termed employees, anybody who was termed in 2020, and move them to a separate file cabinet or a separate folder box, whatever you need to do. Move them to a separate safe keeping location, storage, whatever it is, but keep them close by but out of your way. So you just have your current employees to work with for the year. Shredding the old documents, always important. And then remind your employees to update their personal contact information. We want to have this so we get everybody their W-2s or any kind of 401k reporting or information. If they've moved in the year, if they want to change their emergency contact, whatever it is, remind them at this time of year. It's always good to get updated information. This is another thing that we frequently see. We have a situation with an employee and we go to reach out to the contact information we have on file, and it's 5 years old and they've moved twice in that time frame. So something that you should do every year is update that contact information, or at least send them an email. That is, they have to do nothing if nothing's changed kind of thing. Simple. So final thoughts for our checklist. You have a lot of forms to think about. You can review your policies and procedures, go through information, update anything that's happened this year, make those updates and changes to forms, updates and changes to policies, and take a look at all of those pieces. And you will be in a good spot for wrapping up your 2020. And I know a lot of us are ready to wrap up 2020. And our next coffee break is going to be, like I said, the next step. So we're going to wrap up 2020 and we're going to get ready for 2021. And we have another checklist for you so that you can start out the year in a good, safe direction. So you'll be off to a great start for your business. And then before we close out, I want to let you guys know we're going to start an exciting series for 2021. Our coffee break is going to start the year with the employee life cycle. So we will be starting with recruiting and finding candidates and candidate selection. So the beginning of the year is going to be the beginning of the employee life cycle. So we'll be excited to have you all with us into 2021. All right, guys, any questions today?
Now's your chance, folks.
Now's your chance, all this fun information. They all wrote down all their checklists, so they're all thinking, oh my gosh, I have a lot to do. All right, well, I don't see any questions in the chat box. And again, thank you so much for your time. We love having you with us. CertiPay appreciates you. We appreciate your business and we value you. So keep coming, keep reaching out to us for help. We are here for you. Thank you.